That is the sound that starts the clock on the latest edition of LiveStream Insiders, bringing you the very latest live video and live streaming news for the week ending the 7th of August. And this is episode 45 of our shows, us being me, Peter Stewart, and also Krishna Day as well. Hi, Krishna.
Well, I'm delighted to be here again because our goal, isn't it, Peter, is to make sure that we're always sharing the latest case studies and examples and technology in this ever-moving space. Sometimes we've covered topics like 360 video, we've covered drones, we've covered using live streaming in case of disasters. We've used it in terms of good streams and bad streams. So that's the kind of things that we've got coming up for you in this episode. Do make sure that you let us know what you'd like to hear about in future episodes too. And you can find us on Twitter at LS Insiders. But let's get on to today's news, Peter. Why don't you start off with the first story?
Absolutely.
I think we've got lots more Facebook news to go through as well.
Indeed. So over the past few weeks, we brought you some changes to Facebook Live and also to Periscope as well. And now a subject that we've talked about on and off for the past several months, and that is how on earth do you get your live stream to pay for itself? We've already mentioned, haven't we, Krishna, about 6 months ago or so, the cost that it takes, the amount of money that it takes to archive all of the live streams, whether it be on Periscope or Blab or Meerkat or FireTalk or Facebook Live. Now, obviously, Facebook has got an awful lot of cash to throw at things and has got an awful lot of money to spend on extra servers and so on. But still, that doesn't come cheap. So any which way that they can think of making a little money out of the whole situation, they are going to be taking that with open arms, as you can imagine. So the big talk this week has been Facebook saying in an email, quote, "We're running a small test where a group of publishers have the option to insert a short ad break in their Facebook Live video." So this isn't across the board. They're just doing a little bit of a test, see what the reaction is, see how it works. And the new format will appear 5 minutes into a live broadcast. It'll last around about 15 seconds, maybe a little bit less than that, and it will be selected from campaigns already running on the platform. It makes it easier for them to do that. And also, if you're a publisher, then you'll be able to control what kind of brands that run adverts in your particular channel. So that's really, really interesting. So, for example, if your brand or if your company, if your organization is a little sensitive, you can work out what other adverts or what adverts are going to be running within your live stream. And you know what, Krishna, this strikes me as really, really important. There are obviously going to be a few hiccups along the way. If you're doing a live stream, for example, something to do with politics or something ethical, or maybe a charity or a non-profit organization, you've got to be really, really careful about the kind of adverts that go in to your live stream. And I'm just thinking here in the United Kingdom, obviously the BBC, I don't know whether many people know this or whether everyone knows this, but the BBC is publicly funded. The money for the BBC doesn't come from government, and it doesn't crucially come from advertising. And that means that the BBC's got to be very, very careful. Well, it can't run adverts on any of its TV or radio channels. Or indeed, if you go to bbc.co.uk or bbc.com, you will see no adverts there on bbc.co.uk. That's very, very specific. So I've already had a word with the people at the BBC, and they said, no way will we be running adverts in our Facebook Live broadcasts from here on in. So media owners not only will be able to choose what kind of adverts go in their Facebook Lives, but will also be able to turn off the adverts as well. And that's certainly what they're going to be doing at the BBC, and I guess lots of other kind of sensitive organizations as well. Now, you know what? Facebook has always been a little bit reluctant to show pre-broadcast adverts. In other words, commercials running right before the video. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because if it's going to autoplay, you don't want to be able to see that video before you actually see the content. Who's going to sit through even 15 seconds worth of advert before you see the proper content? very few people. You know what? There are a few news organizations, newspapers, where they tease and tempt and tantalize me into watching their video, but I've got to sit through 30 seconds of adverts before I get it. And even though I quite understand they're not going to put the advert at the end, because frankly, you'll just stop and you won't watch the advert at all, probably doing it midway through is probably the most sensible thing. So as I say, they're going to be running these adverts about 15 seconds worth, around about 5 minutes into your real live broadcast. So mid-roll, in other words. They're testing the live commercials at the moment, and they could eventually be sharing the revenue with media partners. And you know what, Krishna, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because it's going to encourage you as a broadcaster to do much better content if you're going to be getting a cut of the adverts which are shown to more pairs of eyes who are watching that fantastic content that you are producing. If someone else is going to be getting that money, and numbers per se don't mean an awful lot to you, but the old spondulics do, you're hopefully going to go out of your way to create better content.
I also think it's important that we're going to be able to turn off that ad as well. Let's say you were streaming something that was around a disaster. So you know there's lots of social media mistakes that get talked about over time in terms of when people have inappropriately sent out the wrong tweets. Well, you wouldn't want the same to happen with your ads. So it'll be interesting to watch this space. I know there's mixed feelings there. I've watched lots of ads in the middle of watching streaming TV on my mobile devices. And I think there's even something about delivering better value in your ads. So even if you're doing ads, you can make them entertaining.
And it's going to be really interesting as well, isn't it, to see whether Facebook Live kind of commandeers and hijacks your live broadcast, or whether you as a broadcaster will be given some kind of window, maybe some kind of countdown that you can finish your train of thought and then opt to the live. You can perhaps tease the other side of the break. That's going to be increasingly important, you know, coming up, still to come, on the way, those kinds of verbal teasers to make sure people continue watching the other side of that 15 seconds.
And I think those of you who are watching LiveStream Insiders from the US, I'm guessing it's likely that you might see this happening sooner than we do here in Europe, just because of the scale of the live streams that are happening. So if you do, we'd love to hear about it. Make sure you let us know over on Twitter at LS Insiders. But you know, Peter, not everybody believes that actually Facebook Live is here for the future. Their view is that it's going to be here for, it's going to be short-lived. And this is an article on Mashable. And I have to say, I wonder if it was clickbait, but we need to do it justice in terms of talking through it. And it starts off in the article, and of course, everything that we share will be in the show notes that you get access to at the end of the show. But it starts off about talking about Rupert Murdoch, actually, in terms of Wall Street Journal Live, or WSJ Live, being WSJ Video. The change coming after the journal cancelled 3 of its live programs, rendering its video offering less live than before. And it also goes on and talks about the New York Times doing something similar. And in the article, the author talks about the fact that whilst Facebook Live, you know, is something that actually really is getting a lot of push at the minute, he was quite interesting about his commentary about Mark Zuckerberg, which I personally thought was a bit unfair. Which was Mark Zuckerberg famously gives himself a personal challenge each year, ranging from learning Mandarin to writing daily thank you notes. This approach is evident in the business sphere as well. In 2015, the mission may have been to make live video or make video prevalent in the newsfeed. Mission accomplished. This year, it appears to make live video prevalent in the newsfeed. Facebook's attempts to promote live video include the controversial decision of automatically notifying users when live video gets posted, and most recently paying creators to experiment with Facebook Live. Now, I'm not going to read everything from that article, but you know, it does talk about not all of us like to see ads. I know that I get very frustrated sometimes with ads, overlay ads there on YouTube, or the ads that are repetitive in the middle of streaming TV that I'm watching on my mobile device. And we've really talked about that in terms of advertising and how they could be much more interesting. But what they said is Also, the issue in terms of Facebook Live is the lack of editing makes live programming an amateurish and gruesomely boring affair. It's destined for the snap heap. In fact, we'll be looking back on 2016 as the year that Facebook Live was an experiment. We'll recall the Chewbacca mom and the exploding watermelon and the amount of time that we all gave up to watch Facebook Live. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm sure that Mark Zuckerberg has got lots of other things up his sleeve, including what we're going to see in terms of VR and 360. But I think don't dismiss Facebook Live is what I'd say. There's a lot of people and a lot of organizations who've not yet experimented. And if we've talked here in terms of the amount of resources that organizations, including media organizations, are putting into Facebook Live, they're not doing this because it's just a fad. I'm sure they'll continue to innovate. I'm sure they'll continue to review what they're doing, but we don't have the kind of stories that we've talked about with those major organizations investing lots of people behind their Facebook Live programming and other live programming. It's not just Facebook Live. Live is certainly not dead from my perspective. What do you think, Peter?
And we've got a couple of case studies to come. So Krishna's going to be talking about soccer or football and a case study with that in a few moments' time. First of all, let's go back to something we've been talking about with Facebook Live over the course of the past, I guess a couple of months, and that is how the news broadcasters in the United States have been using live streaming during the course of the presidential debates and the presidential meetings and so on, because we've got some numbers now about how many people were watching those broadcasts. ABC News says that they had 28 million views of their live video coverage on Facebook from the Republican and Democratic conventions over the past couple of 3 weeks. 28 million views. That's a huge amount, isn't it? That's, I would guess, more than they've had for their evening news programs in the United States. They live streamed a total of more than 74 hours from the conventions. Okay, so now you've got 74 hours divided by those, or the 28 million divided into the 74 hours. So actually the numbers are coming down a little bit as well. But 35 hours from the Republican National Convention, for example. So we're talking some really interesting numbers here. Really interesting numbers still to come in a few seconds' time. First of all, let me tell you that this article, which is from Variety.com, goes on to say, as for how ABC News audience size on Facebook Live compared with traditional, bog-standard, been around for nearly 100 years TV, the comparison not, they say, apples to apples, because they said an ABC News rep said it does not track unique viewers on Facebook, but it's logical to assume users watched multiple streams of ABC News video on the service. On linear TV, ABC's news coverage of the Republican National Convention reached 17.1 million adults over 4 days. So 17.1 over 4 days and 28 million views of live video output. So you can see those numbers are pretty healthy. ABC News say they broke down their convention coverage into streams from the convention floor plus sit-downs with the delegates, so more traditional kind of interviews and so on, and also key moments as well. They promoted their coverage on Facebook Live, on Twitter, and I think this is something that a lot of organizations are moving out. Just a bit of a sidebar, Krishna. A lot of people are saying, oh yeah, we'll do a Facebook Live, we'll go out on Facebook, but they're forgetting to promote it on some of those other platforms, on some of the other channels, and kind of vice versa. It works less well the other way around, doesn't it? Doing a Periscope and promoting that live on Facebook, just because of the kind of the time difference and how people use that different platform. But people aren't cross-promoting enough, and I think this is really where they're falling down. But anyway, ABC News promoting their Facebook Live on Twitter, both before and after the event, which is really interesting. They were doing shorter streams. They're saying they broke up their streams into two. So they did an 8 to 10 p.m. stream and then another one. And Krishna, did you spot in this article from our good friends over at journalism.co.uk how many people are working on ABC News live stream coverage? It is between 40 250 people. That's a huge number, isn't it? So I can hear an echo of what you were saying about 3 or 4 minutes ago. The number of organizations putting some big numbers behind, a lot of staffing levels behind their live videos, gives the impression, gives every indication they don't see it going anywhere fast.
I think the other thing that was interesting in the couple of articles related to this story around politics is that we shouldn't forget there are other live stream platforms that are being used. So in fact, the article goes on and talks about the fact that YouTube was the official live streaming partner for the Republican and the Democratic national conventions. And the article actually goes through the kind of views that they got there as well. So it's not all about Facebook Live. There are other platforms being used, but really interesting to see that data there. But you talked about before in terms of soccer. I have to say, it's not my strength of sport, not in our family anyway. But sports is huge when it comes to live content. We've seen that with Google Hangouts on Air, some really interesting and innovative things that have happened over the years. We've seen it with Periscope being used. But now Facebook is actually enlisting the soccer elite to help live video. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal. Now, a few weeks ago, we talked about the amount of money that was actually going to be put into working with organizations, how much Facebook themselves are investing. And if you remember, that was $50 million US. And that money is going to a whole lot of different organizations. But today we want to talk about in terms of specifically sports teams. So it's going out to sports media companies, to athletes, and to sports teams as well. And out of that 50 million, 4.4 million is actually earmarked for that sector, according to documents that the Wall Street Journal has seen. Soccer, though, interestingly, was actually featuring very prominently, and I think that's really because of the international appeal of soccer, which obviously, Facebook's international, they want an international audience. Who's the team that actually is going to get the most share, or that lion's share of that money? Actually, it's FC Barcelona. Is actually identified to have 1.03 million from May through to March of next year. That means that they're going to be the 18th highest paid in the Facebook's list of media companies. So that's really quite interesting. Real Madrid is going to get about 917,000, and Arsenal Broadband, turning to the UK, which actually has got the Arsenal's media rights and digital rights, has got a contract for around 349,000, and Manchester City has got a contract for around 221,000. So really interesting. Contracts are going to go from months through to a year. So just interesting to see how that money is being spent. And clearly there's lots of money behind sports.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we've been talking about Facebook Live quite a bit. We got a suggestion about some changes which someone thinks should be made to Periscope. And I must say it's a really interesting suggestion, and we'll come to that in a few moments' time. First of all, here's another user case study for you. And it's from American Public Service Broadcasting. It's NPR, I should say, in the United States, who've been experimenting with Facebook Live since March. They say it's a great way to test new people out on camera. And I should say that NPR is one of those organizations that have been paid by Facebook to produce live video. Reportedly, incidentally, come closer, $1.2 million for a 12-month deal to use Facebook Live. Now, obviously, there's quite a bit of quality which is inherent with NPR, and also they're being broadcasters, so they're going to know the kind of ideas about what works well and so on. So it's going to be interesting, perhaps for you, when I tell you the kinds of program formats that they've got going on. First of all, this is their lineup. The team includes producers brought in from the organization's video and music department, 2 creative directors, a few members of staff focused on social, and that their philosophy, their idea is that if anyone's got a good idea to go live on Facebook, they are encouraged to do just that. They're given some training, they're given a bit of support. So not just handing it over willy-nilly, but it is organised, but it is being quite creative and open with their staff. And they say the content varies from daily news segments to regular segments for the podcast, because NPR do an awful lot of podcasts, as you know, programming and music and international reporters out in the field. And here are a couple of the things that they've got going as far as formats go. They say Head to Head, that's the name of one of them, where two editors and the audience collectively try to come up with headlines for an upcoming NPR story. Interesting. Initialism, a broadcast from the Ask Me Another podcast, which obviously goes down a storm in the US and abroad, where the team plays a live word game with the viewers, and a new series that takes NPR science reporter Adam Cole inside the Smithsonian Museum, interviewing different scientists in their labs about the experiments that they're doing and so on. What have most of all, or all of those got in common? It's interactivity, people. It's playing games with the audience, and it's getting the audience to ask questions of an expert that you've got in the studio, and it's asking the audience to come up with ideas and suggestions for some of the content that you're going to be putting on the radio. This is what people forget very often, isn't it, Krishna? The live part and the interactivity part of live streaming. So they say whenever we can get the audience to really take an active role in video, whether it's playing host or playing along in a game, it's really successful and people stick around for longer. They say grabbing people's attention for longer and actually convincing them to turn on the sound and watch the video is the biggest challenge at the moment. If only there was kind of live words across the bottom, ticker tape, transcript of what you were saying, perhaps that would work. As for duration, about 16 minutes, they say, works really well. They say the longer you are live, the more people will tune in. I think 16 minutes is a really interesting idea, and we have to realize the audience isn't going to watch from start to finish, so we have to make sure we structure the content of videos accordingly. So presenters will often reintroduce themselves or reorientate people into what they're talking about and asking the audience to use the comments to interact. Again, one of my pet peeves, and that is, it's the structure of your show. It's the content and it's the structure. Keep reintroducing yourself, keep reintroducing the topic, say what you've just done, say what you're going to be doing in the next few minutes, and keep those plates spinning for as long as you possibly can, but don't make it too long.
We're all learning from major broadcasters, aren't we, Peter? There's so much that you bring to this show and so much that you bring in terms of the education you give to others through the live streaming platforms that you use and the work that you do in terms of taking that. And talking about that, because actually you have done so much work in terms of on Periscope, let's turn our attention to two quick Periscope stories. One is actually somebody that many of you will know if you're on Periscope, Alex Petit. He's based in the UK. Both Peter and I know him. He's a very big advocate of Periscope. He uses it very innovatively as well in terms of drones and with his GoPro and so on. And he raised an interesting thing in terms of a story that a conversation he'd had when he was in LA for VidCon, which is about how difficult that people said they were finding it to be able to easily share content from a live stream on Periscope. And he's right. You know, if you're on a Periscope, you have to tell people how to be able to share your live stream, and it's different on Android than iOS, and that makes it confusing. It did make me think about all of these different apps. How do you try and make them as similar as possible so the user experience is easy? Actually, it makes it easier for the broadcaster, but also people who, like me, I actually switch between apps because I actually teach off both of those apps. And I thought it was really interesting in terms of him coming up with that idea. Now, he reached out to one of the technical guys over at Periscope, and the feedback was, you know, not a fan of a button that's always on screen that gets used only a small amount of time, which I can fully understand. But actually, Alex did a little mock-up in his post over on Medium, and it doesn't have to be obvious. But you know what it got me thinking about, Peter? Wouldn't it be great if we could have some of the features on Periscope and on over here on Facebook Live that actually we had, let's say, on Blab? One of the things that was great about Blab is you could actually easily share content out, and it actually had a little animated GIF. We know we love GIFs. it makes it easy for people to actually bring other people to the platform. I'm really surprised that actually that hasn't happened for Facebook Live, given they want to be the home of video content and the home of live video content. So maybe that's on the offing. But let's talk about another example of somebody using Periscope, just as we kind of talk about Periscope today. This is a story that Peter picked up. And when I read about it, I just thought, just sounds like something I've seen before. And this is a brand that I've never come across before, which is Wingstop. So those of you who are in the US, actually, you might have actually know Wingstop. But they had a little while ago, back on the end of July, they had a whole series of live streams that they did on Periscope for National Chicken Wing Day. I didn't even know there was National Chicken Wing Day. I'm sorry I missed it. But one of the things they did is they actually had a whole series of auctions. Now, I immediately thought, until I looked at it, that this felt like it was a bit like what was happening with, I don't know if anybody remembers, Doritos did a huge game show last year in terms of launching a new brand and actually they had a whole big game show and a casino online and so on. But it was a bit different. So all you had to do was get onto one of their live streams and actually just pat it and give it hearts. So give them as many hearts as you could. And it went for a number of minutes. And they actually then in real time showed who actually was at the top of their leaderboard, which I thought was quite an interesting approach. So they could show who was at the top of the leaderboard. And then at the end, they actually said, congratulations, and you've won. And then they also directed you back over. So you'll actually find that live stream because they haven't deleted it. So if you want to, go over to Periscope or go to Twitter, of course, and look for Wingstop, and you'll see the archive of their content. Interesting way, probably not good for their brand in the long term, because I can't see them actually when I say not good for their brand, not good for them in terms of using Periscope. They're not building up an audience there, but it was certainly a different way to actually bring attention to their organization using some innovative tools for National Chicken Wing Day. And I'm sure there would be lots of other places that you can buy chicken from in the US who would have been competing for that space too.
So we've got 3 minutes to go on Livestream Insiders for this particular week. We always try and keep our programs to 30 minutes. So you know exactly where you are. So you know that if you've got 30 minutes to spare, you can listen to the whole of the show in one sitting rather than thinking from week to week, how long is this going to last for? Or indeed, some people's live streams that could go on, frankly, for longer than it took Noah to build an ark. But Krishna alluded to this right at the top of the show, and that was what the main broadcaster in the UK is doing regarding social media around the Olympics. So the official broadcaster of the Olympics here in the United Kingdom is, of course, as you would expect, the BBC. So they have got some clips running on Facebook, first of all, which are going to be geo-blocked, so only people in the UK can watch them, which is really, really interesting. There's all sorts of rights issues, as you probably know. They are really, really hot. In fact, the aforementioned Alex Pettit was blocked, had his account on Periscope suspended for a few hours earlier on in the week because he mentioned something to do with the Olympics, and someone was a little bit hasty in blocking him. So he did appeal and got that account reinstated. But the whole thing is that they're going to be putting clips of the Olympics just so people can watch on Facebook in the UK. They're also doing some Facebook Lives as well, and some of those are going to be geo-fenced too, which is really interesting because that is obviously quite new, geo-fencing a Facebook Live. The whole idea, of course, is to drive people back to the BBC, the magnificent BBC Sport and BBC News apps and websites where you can get even more information. And also they've got a deal with Facebook that they're going to be showcasing some of the BBC's best Olympics material on a daily basis. As far as Snapchat goes, not quite live video, but near enough that we sometimes mention it. They've actually done an agreement with Snapchat. So Snapchat themselves producing some daily snaps of UGC material, user-generated content material from the athletes and inside the athletes' village, not from the actual necessarily from the tracks and the stadium themselves. So that linking in with the BBC and Snapchat. So that's going to be really, really interesting. And they've also got deals and things in the works to have obviously lots of Twitter stuff, again geo-fenced, and also to be uploading lots of video and photos to Instagram, as you would imagine too, and also some a lot of 360. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity, isn't it, for 360 views of the Olympics, because of course it is such a spectacle and there's so much to show. So daily 360 highlights, again restricted to the UK, only on Facebook and YouTube as well. So an awful lot there. If you're elsewhere around the world, or if you're in the UK and want to see exactly what the BBC is doing, then the hashtag is hashtag Rio 2016. So you'll be able to see, of course, what the BBC is doing on hashtag BBC Rio 2016. And that takes us to the 30 minutes. Thank you so much indeed for watching. Really appreciate you watching, appreciate the loan of your eyes, and appreciate you clicking along at this time of a weekend. And we'll be back, of course, in 7 days with some more live streaming news.
And we should just actually end by saying, do take care of actually paying attention to how much data you're using on your live streams. In the stories that we're going to share with you this week is also a little bit of research that I've been doing over the last week or so. And can you guess which between Periscope, Facebook profile and Facebook pages demands the most data for watching? Well, more than 3 times as much data is being used if you live stream. This is you as a broadcaster live stream from your personal profile. You can find out the reasons for that in the show notes. But remember, join us at 7 p.m. in the UK and Ireland, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, next time, the 14th of August, for our next show here on Livestream Insiders. Thanks again for being with us.